It's a gloomy day in the countryside, and a couple named Carter and Mara are reconciling after a heated argument. The happy son holds a red balloon, his laughter filling the air as he plays with the faithful family dog on the front lawn. While Carter enjoys a sip of beer, his son trips over a metal crowbar. Mara is concerned and reminds her husband to clean up the field, but he seems to take it calmly. The opening scene ends with the release of a red balloon, and the next thing we see is the grave of a little boy. Next, in the same cemetery, we meet a charming little girl named Isabel. She is often called Birdie, a nickname she doesn't like. Isabel carries her late parents' camera with her, which she uses to calm herself and hide her emotions. To pay her respects to her parents, she is taken to the cemetery by her guardian Roger, her aunt's boyfriend. After spending some time with her parents, the girl notices that a funeral is taking place nearby in the cemetery. They are attended only by a middle-aged woman, her bodyguard, and the funeral chaplain. Suddenly, the peaceful scene is shattered when the priest is shot and falls to his knees. The woman is left lying there, shaken by the projectile, and before her bodyguard can react, he suffers the same fate. A tall, intimidating assassin appears out of the woods, dressed in a black coat and mask. How, I wonder, can this guy see? Isabel becomes an unwitting witness to a brutal murder. The hitman removes the mask and nonchalantly informs her that he is just fulfilling a contract, then takes the woman's life as well. After experiencing fear, Isabel manages to capture the killer's face as he buries the victims and the murder weapons. The girl desperately runs after Roger, but finds that he is no longer around. On his way to find Isabel, Roger reaches the murder scene and keeps shouting her name, which attracts the killer's attention. Isabel manages to warn her guardian, but she is unable to save him. Amidst Isabel's frightened screams, the killer's gaze is drawn to the camera around her neck. At this turn of events, he feels compelled to kill Isabel as well, disregarding the fact that she is just an innocent, lonely child. Frightened and in need of help, Isabel ends up at the home of Carter, the veteran we've already mentioned. He is tormented by self-injury after losing his son, believing that if he had cleaned the field that day, his child would still be breathing. He's just about finished writing a despondent letter to his spurned wife when he hears Isabel's desperate pleas and rushes to open the door. Carter turns to her for help. Before he can ask any questions, however, a hitman shoots him in the leg. Wasting no time, he drags the girl to the safety of his home, quickly picks up 2 bullets and heads up the stairs. As soon as the hitman swings the door open, Carter fires in a split second, hitting her in the stomach. Carter and Isabel make it to the top floor. Carter's leg is bleeding. The hitman is also shot in the abdomen. The hitman is frozen behind cover, trying to shoot from behind the stairs, but doesn't hit anyone. When Carter recognizes the hitman's weapon, he realizes he's not dealing with an average Joe. Meanwhile, the hitman checks Carter's bullet and notices that he has a 20-gauge shotgun with a short range. This is where the movie escalates into an exciting battle of wits between Carter and the hitman. They both try to gain the upper hand in this conflict, but neither one backs down. When Carter threatens to call the police, the hitman discovers that the phone is dead, proving that Carter was just bluffing. Undeterred, Carter claims he has a cell phone, but unfortunately, the hitman finds it downstairs. In fact, the hitman's only plan is to get Carter to send Isabel downstairs, since she's seen his face. He uses all sorts of tricks to convince Carter, threats, promises to spare him since he hasn't seen his face yet, plays the time card because Carter is bleeding. But despite all the obstacles, Carter decides to take care of the baby. Wasting no time, Carter enlists Isabel's help, telling her to bring a first aid kit, some light bulbs, and a towel. When both parties have cleaned themselves up a bit, Carter wraps the light bulbs in the towel, smashes them good, and scatters the shards on the stairs. That way, the shards would make noise and alert them if a hitman tried to sneak up. Carter is in dire straits. He only has 1 bullet left, and things aren't looking very convincing. The good news is that the hitman doesn't realize it. They are trapped, from which there is no way out except to jump out of the window. However, that option is impossible because Carter has an injured leg. Meanwhile, Isabel talks about her past and how she lost her parents in a terrible accident. And this hits Carter hard as it brings back memories of the day he lost his own son. Holding the camera her parents left her, Isabel suddenly remembers taking a picture of the killer's face on it. Carter quickly asks for the film, which he wraps tightly in a plastic bag and tells Bird to hide it in the water tank behind the toilet. Killer, on the other hand, tries to piece things together and learn more about Carter by digging through his packed boxes. He stumbles upon a framed family photo and tries to taunt Carter with his comments. It turns out that Carter used to be in the army. The killer then claims to be a veteran himself and even has a daughter about the same age as Isabel. When he fails to get anything out of Carter with the ID, he starts threatening his family. But Carter doesn't even blink an eye, because he has no one to lose. The psychological duel between them reaches its climax when the killer threatens to set the whole house on fire. That's when Carter drops the bombshell, revealing that he has a tape of his imprinted face sealed underwater in a Ziploc bag. And even if the house burns down, it doesn't help the hitman because the cops are bound to find the tape, much to the hitman's annoyance. There's a fresh cop patrolling nearby. He's talking on the radio to the cameraman when he notices two parked cars. However, he doesn't inform the support team and continues his patrol to the cemetery, where he discovers an unfinished funeral and suspects something is wrong. Back at Carter's house, the hitman finds a letter that slipped out of Carter's pocket while he and Carter were under the influence of alcohol. He begins to read it aloud in a mocking tone. It is an apology letter from Carter to his wife Mara, expressing his deep sorrow and guilt over the death of their child. As the hitman unravels like a maniac, a traumatic memory comes over Carter. He recalls a scene in which a boulder he was supposed to remove from a field caused his child's death, and he himself was mortified by his uninvited guest. As he continues reading, the killer realizes that the letter is more like a suicide note, and Carter was about to commit suicide until Isabel made her desperate pleas to him. But now Carter has a good reason not to give up. He failed to take care of his own child and is probably now feeling paternal instincts towards Isabel. He makes a firm promise to keep her safe from a psychopathic killer. While they are all hugging, the killer fires 2 shots out of nowhere to keep them in suspense. Just as Roger's body is about to be discovered, a young officer hears the shots and immediately runs to the source. After spotting the house, he gets in his car and starts driving back to the same spot without calling for backup. At the same time, the lights in Carter's house begin to flicker, indicating that he has delayed refueling the generator with fuel. This worries him, because if night falls and the lights go out, it will be nearly impossible to stop the killer. Suddenly, he remembers a plan he knew before was a bad idea. Isabel is to jump out of the window without Carter. At first, she is frightened and doesn't agree, but Carter somehow manages to talk her into it. So he helps her get out of the house through the window. Just as Isabel reaches the roof, a policeman appears. The killer hears the car and notices his presence. He puts on his mask, ready to shoot when the officer knocks. The moment the knock sounds, the killer fires a single bullet, knocking the policeman straight to the ground. Not realizing what is happening, Isabel jumps onto the crate that made the loud sound. She meets the killer's gaze, but bounces back before he can shoot her. The man starts chasing her to finish the job, but luckily for her, the gun turns out to be empty and she manages to get back into the house. The hitman then approaches the wounded policeman, who tries to snatch the gun, and strikes him hard in the head, knocking him out completely. Once the hitman has parked his car in the garage, Carter runs out onto the balcony and catches him off guard. He tells the hitman to leave his property with his gun at the ready, threatening to shoot him otherwise. However, the killer is well aware of the limited range of Carter's gun. He also knows that if Carter really had plenty of ammunition, as he claims, he would not hesitate to shoot him even from a distance. So he doesn't fall for his bluff and points his gun at Carter, which causes him to quickly flee into the house. The hitman then ties the officer to a chair and starts hammering his fingers off one by one with a hammer. While the cop is screaming, the killer demands that Carter hand over the girl and the tape or the cop will be killed. Carter refuses to give up the girl. He calls the killer a sick man who is only looking for an excuse to kill. So the killer calmly takes the cop's life and sends his body to Carter to show him the result. A few minutes pass and Carter doesn't hear any noise from downstairs. As a result, he tries to manipulate the hitman by admitting defeat and promising to send Isabel downstairs. But he gets no response, leading him to conclude that the hitman is not on the bottom floor. He decides to check what's going on downstairs and tells Isabel, who panics, to lock herself in the bathroom. He carefully makes his way down the stairs, stepping on shards of glass, and finds nothing but the killer's shoes. Carter begins to investigate the situation and discovers that the hitman acted on the sly. He used the stairs to get upstairs and went barefoot so as not to make noise. Isabel clutches the camera in fear and, hearing footsteps, calls out to Carter to make sure it's him. The hitman turns to head in her direction, but then Carter suddenly appears, knocking him off balance and sending him tumbling down the glass-covered stairs. Now the hitman has a laceration on his leg, and Carter decides to fry him. Although he doesn't have the tape, the whole situation makes him think about setting the house on fire. But just as he is about to do so, a thought pops into his head and he freezes, staring at Carter's cell phone. As night falls, Carter and the hitman begin to communicate again. Carter asks him how he became such a monster and how he manages to commit such horrible crimes. Killer admits that at first it was hard for him to take lives, but over time it became easier. He makes it clear that he doesn't kill for pleasure. His only motivations for killing are the need for money and necessity. He concludes his explanation with a quote that has all the answers Carter is looking for. Later, a car pulls up to the house, and the killer's face is painted devil red, as if Satan himself has just woken up. He opens the door, holding a gun and wearing a mask. Soon he shouts Carter's name, letting him know that a friend is ready to meet him. Curious as to who is downstairs, Carter hears the trembling voice of his wife Mara, and his curiosity instantly turns to rage. As a result, we learn that the hitman pretended to be a friend when he called Mara on Carter's phone, tricking her into thinking he was sick and desperately needed her. With those words, the hitman begins the countdown. Mara's life is in danger if Carter doesn't send Isabel down. Upon reflection, Carter grabs the frightened girl, who is screaming for her life. Suddenly, he gives her his gun, ordering her to shoot the killer if he tries to approach. Pulling out a knife, Carter decides to go down himself. Carter boldly approaches the hitman and tells him that if he's looking for the girl, she's waiting for him upstairs, armed with a shotgun. Instead, he suggests that the hitman go home to his own daughter. Enraged, the hitman reveals that everything he told Carter, including having a daughter, was a lie designed to deceive him. Carter begs the hitman to spare their lives, explaining that they never saw his face. Now the killer begins to threaten Carter's life and demands that Isabel appear. Against Carter's warnings, Isabel confidently descends the stairs, picking up a shotgun and pointing it directly at the man. At that moment, the lights begin to flicker and distract the hitman. At this point, Carter jumps up and seizes the opportunity. He pounces on the hitman with relentless force and stabs him in the neck time after time until everything around him is plunged into darkness by an accidental gunshot. While Mara goes to call emergency services, Isabel stays in place to confront the killer. She confidently pulls the trigger, but nothing happens. It turns out that Carter and Isabel had been counting on the gun not going off all along. Now everything is reversed. The hitman raises the gun. Isabel puts on her Nike Courage sneakers and urges him to just do it. However, the killer refuses and spares her, stating that he is not a monster and exhales the last of his strength. Isabel approaches Carter, sees that he is still alive, and shows a smile we haven't seen before. Off camera, with no sign of worry on her face, she thanks him for saving her. Carter says he just repaid her in kind, making it clear that if it weren't for Isabel, he would have killed himself.